Hey legends, Blake here with another video, and today I'm going to give you the long-awaited rundown of my 8-foot aquarium. How this came into my possession, how I've set it up, including building the stand and setting up the sump, what I've stocked it with, and how I've scaped it out. So I think it'll be a really interesting one today. If you haven't seen me before or come across the channel, my name is Blake, this is Blake's Aquatics, and I do all sorts of care guides and things like that on fish, plants and shrimp, and anything to do with the freshwater hobbies. But let's jump straight into it, and I'll tell you the story of how this came to be. Okay, so the story of how the 8-foot came into my possession is actually a really big coincidence. So my friend from school, who obviously I've known for a long time now, his brother was doing a renovation on a house nearby to me. Well, I say nearby, it was about a 20-minute drive, but in Australia that is classified as nearby. Anyway, it was a massive property, really opulent, beautiful sort of polished concrete floors, multi-million-dollar house on the waterfront, and they had this tank in there set up as a marine tank. This is an 8x2x2 aquarium, and it comes with a 5-foot by 18-inch sump. From what I understand, a new buyer took over the house and they weren't so much into fish keeping, marine or otherwise, and they told my friend's brother to actually smash up the tank. I think we can all agree that that would have been a huge shame for such a beautiful tank to end up in a dumpster. And luckily he did know that I was a pretty mad fish keeper. So he contacted my friend and my friend contacted me and said, if you can get here tonight or tomorrow in the morning with a trailer, then you can have this big, beautiful tank. Of course, I jumped at that. I was making heaps of late night phone calls because I actually don't own a trailer. Anyway, in the end, my mother-in-law did help me out quite a lot, and we pulled up to the place in the morning where they had the guys actually loaded onto the trailer for us, which was brilliant. Then of course came the issue of unloading it once we got home. I actually worked that day, so I toddled off to work, came back home in the afternoon, and stood there staring at the tank thinking, how am I gonna get this off? But I used a bunch of furniture dollies and sort of angled it off, got it to the point where I could stand up the sump alongside the wall outside my house, and the 8-foot tank itself was on furniture dollies rolled in straight into the fish room, which would be in front of where we're standing today. Anyway, so that was brilliant, a huge relief. I've got the tank, I've got the sump, it's all been home safely, and at least then I can sort of plan a little bit better now that the time pressure was off. At that point then, it was time to build the stand and think about all of those sorts of things. Now luckily I built all the racks for the room here, so I'm pretty confident now building fish stands and racks, even for something like this, which within this footprint is going to have about a ton of water, which is quite a bit of weight. But went down to the hardware store, got a whole bunch of 90x45 pine, and built the stand exactly as I built my 3-tier racks. Now on the top, I've put some form ply, which is some plywood specifically made for forming up concrete. I like it because it's really water resistant, pretty easy to work with, and in this case, it was convenient because it came in the size that I need. Below every tank in the fish room here, I put this gym tile. Unfortunately, at the time, there was only blue available. I wish there was black. I probably should have waited, but patience just wasn't on my side that day. But I got the blue and I put it there, so we've got the blue tile there. And then I just built a timber base for the sump to sit on, because although it doesn't need to have legs or anything like that, I still wanted somewhere flat so that I knew that the sump wouldn't be twisting and turning, and something that I could level up so that the base of the sump didn't crack. So here you can see basically how I've built the stand here. Bit of a platform here for the 5-foot to sit on. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cross beams that go underneath the sump. It's basically just a big rectangle with some cross beams. Now the same applies for the 8-foot, as you can see there. And typically I wouldn't have the legs on the outside like this. I'd usually have these legs on the inside. However, if I did that, the sump wouldn't be able to fit. It barely fits as it is the way that it has been set up. So in my case, I had to put them on the outside, but for the racks, I actually put them on the inside. These outside pieces, they really don't serve much purpose anyway, other than just making sure that these ones here that do take the load don't slip out either inside or outside. Now, in my case, it was a little bit wobbly, so I just put some cross bracing on each leg just to make it a little bit more stable. Eventually, I'd like to come through and put some more in the other directions, but I just haven't got around to that yet. Quick couple of calls to a few neighbors. Luckily, I have quite a few strong neighbors that were willing to help me out, and within an afternoon, we lifted the 8-foot up and we were in business. So now that the 8-foot was on top, it was time to consider plumbing. Now, this tank here already had an overflow siliconed in made of glass, which was beautiful, and it had 3 holes drilled in the base. So I thought of the best way that I could plumb up the sump, and in my case, I went with what's known as a bean animal overflow. Basically, what this involves is 3 standpipes for drainage. You have one that is constantly under full siphon. You'll have one that is using the amount that is more than the siphon can handle, and then you just have an emergency overflow in case either of those previous 2 get clogged. Now, the beauty of this system is that it is absolutely silent. There's no really undesirable gurgling noises, and this tank here is one of the quietest tanks of all, especially because there's no bubbling from a sponge filter. So I actually can't hear this tank whatsoever when I'm just sitting in the room, and I'd suggest that this sort of system would be something that I'd recommend if you're setting it up in a living space or something like that. For the emergency overflow, I actually used vinyl tubing on that one, and that's just because I wanted to be able to visually see if anything was going down there, because in a typical sense, when I'm standing here and the garage door's down, I actually can't really see into the overflow. So if I have vinyl tubing there and I can see water going down, I'll know then it's time to unclog a blockage or something like that. So that's why I chose to do that. Okay, so here you can see a bunch of reflections, but basically how it is set up. So you got 3 bulkheads down the bottom, all connected up. Now, the first pipe here is under 100% siphon. Now, the way that this works is you control how much siphon is going in there by this red tap here. If it was fully open, then what would happen is this would just handle all of the return water, and it would gurgle and make those noises that are undesirable. So you go down to your tap here and you turn that down slightly so that even when this is under full siphon, the water level very, very slowly creeps up. And it creeps up and creeps up until it reaches this second overflow here, in which case it just slowly trickles down and goes through just down straight into the start of the sump there. In this third overflow, as I mentioned, should never really see any water except in case of emergency. So the way that this one is set up to make it super quiet, you have an elbow on there, so there's no sort of echoey noises, and you have a cap on the top. You drill a little hole in that so that the air can get through, and there's no air locks or anything like that. And that's basically how I set up this bean animal overflow. Okay, so back inside the fishery now, I'll show you the rest of how the overflow works. So as you can imagine, these are connected to those standpipes. They come through down into a filter sock to clear out some fine debris, and then they go under this glass baffle here and then up through a few layers of media. So first up, we have some very coarse metalamat, which is kind of like sponge but very, very coarse. Comes up through some more coarse sponge, progressively getting to some finer filter floss, and then these black sponges here on the top are just really holding down the filter floss so that they don't flip up and over and cause issues. Now, from that point, there is another baffle here. So water goes down and then up and then travels through all of this media here. So I've got a bunch of backy rods, porous media. I've got some base rock, holy rock just to keep the pH up, some bags of ceramic rings and things like that. Really just massive overkill for what we are trying to achieve here. I've got another baffle here that I can use, but at the moment it is filled with a whole bunch of spare sponge filters that I can use in other tanks if I like. as I set up more tanks. And then this bit of kit here is my UV sterilizer, which I find just to sort of help take some certain colors out of the water, like some green algae and things like that. Maybe some parasites might come out of the water. I had it on hand and I figured it absolutely couldn't hurt running it in this system. So gives me a little bit more clear water as well. So I'm happy with that. So then we move on from the sponge filters and it goes over again, another baffle into the inlet where it's connected to this pump here, which is a BioPro pump. It's not really technically for an overflow, it's more of a pond pump. I may change that to a DC pump in future, but for now that pumps about 5,000 liters or 1,250 gallons an hour into the tank. So this pump is connected via a vinyl hose which travels up over there and then connects into this piece of PVC here, which then runs up and over and into the tank. Now you're probably looking at this return and thinking it looks a bit funky. Why has he decided to waste PVC making that thing? Well, it's actually for a reason. So the reason I set it up like this is because when the pump shuts off, if I didn't have this T here, what would happen is the water would drain down to the top of this circular piece here, which is actually quite a lot of water in an 8x2x2 aquarium. So instead I put a T-piece there. Some of the flow will go out there, some of the flow will go out there, so it's a bit less aggressive for the fish. And then that sits a little bit higher, so when the pump actually shuts off, very little water gets back siphoned into the sump, which I'm happy about. So that's why I've set it up like that. I'll probably spray it with Plasti Dip at some point in time to make it black and a little bit less obtrusive. But in my mind, if you've got all of this in front of you and you're looking at that PVC return, then you're probably not going to be pleased in any case. So now we know the story about how I got the tank, what I did to get it ready and set up, how it works precisely. So I think it's about time we talked about what I did then to set it up. So this tank here, I wanted a nice community tank. I wanted, not to have hundreds and hundreds of different species. I wanted sort of a few purpose selected species, even though I haven't really chosen like a river system or even a continent to specifically go with. Obviously we've got clown loaches there, which are from Asia. Then we've got rainbow fish, which are native Australian. We have some Peruvian ultim angels there. So we are sort of picking fish from around the world, but I'm just picking fish that I enjoy looking at. So the way that I set it up, if we start from the substrate, I've got some coarse sand here at the front. However, that is a bit of an illusion because at the back through here, we actually have a whole bunch of aqua soil. So the aqua soil layer goes and tapers from the front all the way to the back. And then we've just got some coarse sand, really just capping that, and just very, very little at all. I think I use like 125 kilogram bag or something like that. Now this aqua soil here has started to come to the front, mainly because that's where I feed the fish through the opening up here, and all the clown loaches sift around in here. But I actually don't mind that. It kind of seems a little bit more natural, if anything, to have all of the sand and then transitioning to more of an aqua soil. In terms of the hardscape for this tank, I definitely wanted driftwood, not rocks. So I've got a bunch of huge pieces of driftwood there. So that's one piece there. Another piece is across here to there. That's another piece there. Another piece snakes down like that, and then another piece is there. And what I really love about this is that I knew I was going to get clown loaches for this tank. So there's a tunnel. These are actually fully hollow pieces that there's a tunnel that goes directly through under there, the entire 8-foot duration, the entire 8-foot length of the tank. And I have to say a huge thanks to Bodgy from Australia. He came with me on the day that I went to pick this hardscape from a local store, and he helped me to lay it out on the floor in the store and make sure that I was happy with it. So to know that this was going to work, we actually laid it out in this exact fashion on the floor of the fish store, which I would recommend doing. So in terms of plants, I ordered a bunch of plants. Well, first I gathered a bunch of plants from around the fish room, such as this Apontigeton here. We got some crypt Balancy there as well, some Amazon swords and things like that, and various crypts. But I also placed a fairly large plant order with All Fish to You and got them as well. So we got some Val, some crypts, a melon sword there, some needleleaf Java fern, and a bunch of easy care plants that I knew would do okay. Now, they probably don't look that great right now because I did have to run some Purigen to get the tannins out of the water. So this much driftwood, the water was just like super dark. You could barely see into it. So I've been running Purigen since I set this tank up, which has been just naturally sucking any fertilizer I've put into the water out. So that I'll take the Purigen out very soon and start to dose some fertilizer. To help the plants settle in, I set up this CO2 system here, which is not running very powerfully. I could actually probably turn that up a bit, probably to something more like that. And that just has a diffuser there that eventually I'll probably turn into an inline diffuser with the return pump. Now, in terms of lighting this aquarium, super simple. I've got some office panel LED lights, 2 of those, and I've got 3 LED downlights or floodlights. There's 3. So really cheap. These guys are about $20 each, and they just provide a bit more intensity to the back row of plants until they sort of come over the top of the driftwood. And these panel lights do a lot of the bulk of the work at the front of the tank. And they were about $100 each. So if you're trying to grow plants in an 8-foot aquarium and you can do it for, you know, a couple of $100, then I think that that's a pretty good result. And we'll see. I might upgrade as time goes on, but as you can imagine, it was sort of a plan that came into motion pretty quickly. So for what it is, I'm happy with that at the moment. Okay, so we had the hardscape in, the substrate in, and everything loosely planted out. It was time to start to think about stocking. So I already had 3 or 4 Peruvian Ultima Angels, so I ordered a few extras from All Fish to You because I absolutely love those guys. I thought a natural aquarium like this would suit them perfectly, and they'd really love the height in particular. So I had those in mind for sure, and I knew that it would be a good idea to have something with some activity. So a local breeder nearby to me here in Geelong, Victoria, actually breeds a bunch of these trifasciata Goyder River rainbow fish. So Melanitania trifasciata. And I just think they're absolutely stunning, especially when they're in spawning mode like that guy there. Beautiful reds, blues, greens, and other things. And again, I wanted something that wasn't too flashy, too overbearing, and I thought that they would settle in perfectly. Some horizontal stripes and some reds versus some orangey vertical stripes. I just thought it was a pretty good match. And then on the theme of orange and stripes, I absolutely love clown loaches, but I've never really sort of been able to keep a big school of them in an appropriate size tank. So I've got 10 clown loaches in here as well, which came in at a pretty good size actually, and I'm quite happy with how they're doing. They were quite shy early on, but nowadays they're pretty outgoing because they associate me with food. Perhaps a bit more subtle than the other fish that we've run through so far, I also have these red-breasted Aquarium, which are a dwarf cichlid species. Again, just something, a little pop of color. The inbreeding mode, they get some really nice spangling and some purple throats to them, or red breasts, I suppose. But just another little point of difference, and another species that I really love. And I was kind of hoping that these guys could be the ones that might spawn for me in a tank like this. So I thought that they'd be a good chance to find a little nook or a cranny in amongst these driftwoods and caves, and red-breasted acaris might be a great option. So I've got about 8 of those, I think, in here, and I love those guys as well, and they're growing quite well. Now there is actually one more fish in here, but I'm not sure exactly where he is at the moment, and that is a huge whiptail catfish. He's probably from about there to there long, so yeah, he's a good 25 centimeters long. Very skinny, as you can imagine, with whiptails. I'll try and find some footage at some point in time when he's next out and overlay that over this, but he's one of those ones that I thought would be great in here as sort of the fish that you don't really notice, and then something, a bit of movement just catches your eye, and then, you know, it's something a bit different. So that's what I chose to stock this aquarium with. I do think I'm still perhaps one species short. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to put in there yet, but there's absolutely no reason that we should just jam a billion fish in here all at once. And as it is, you know, provides a really great feature to look at, and I really enjoy sitting in front of this aquarium and just looking all over the place at all the activity, and yeah, I think it's really fun. So there you go, guys, that is the full tour of my 8-foot aquarium. Hopefully it helped if you are looking to set up a sump for yourself, or maybe it scratched that itch if you're looking to get a big aquarium yourself but you're not quite as lucky as I've been. So if you like this video, it always helps me out to smash like, hit subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And in the meantime, if you did have a species of fish that you think would go awesome in this tank, let me know down below, and it just might happen. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.